away.
Shannon, you guys have been so consistent offensively the whole year. When you go through a lull like you went through the other day in the middle of the game, is it kind of like a shock to you?
No, because it might be consistent, seem consistent. Every game has those. They do. I mean, the beauty of playing an early game sometimes is you get to watch football, which a lot of times we don't get to watch football. And so when you have a game like that, you watch football and you see two things are evident. One is no game goes perfect. There's going to be ebbs and flows of game, highs, lows, all the rest. And the other one is like games late in the year are hard to win. If you watch games at this time of year, typically every game at halftime is tight. Almost every game is tight at halftime. Now the team, at the end of the game, it is what it is. But typically every game this time of year at halftime is really tight. And that's what you see. And then the second half, it's either stays tight and you got to squeak out a win, or you can pull away a little bit. But halftime of every game that I watched this weekend, I was like, that gun, like, it's a 1 point game, And so it's just the way it is. You can't score 40 points in a play, It takes time, and it takes like a team effort, I mean, the defense did an unbelievable job like Saturday, because when we did screw up, right, and gave them a short field, defense stopped. And then when defense got a turnover or we got a short field, we scored. And that's how they kind of got out of the rut. You know what I mean? So every game has those. It's just, it might not be as long, but they do,
It is I should know this, I don't, sorry. I assume you have some dome experience. I don't know about Carrier Dome, but it's loud. And I can say that as an upstate New Yorker, it's a loud.
I've been there.
What, the challenge of communication, obviously now through technology, but that doesn't always
Yeah.
rely on it all. I know you guys concentrate on working on the hand signals and all that every week. Just what is the challenge of going to places in the league?
It's just, the challenge isn't as much a challenge as just like we have things in place for games that we deem to be loud, and we'll just change the cadence up. We have multiple cadences we can go on. Obviously, the majority of it is clap, but if like when we played Florida game 1, we went silent. We thought that was going to be a loud environment. It ended up not being too loud, but it was like, we could have, and we'll switch at times from, like if we get into a game and it's not what we thought it would be, we can switch from one to another. We can switch. Cam has switched in between drives before, so it's whatever cadence we deem appropriate for that game. And then once we get into that game, it usually changes, but sometimes it doesn't.
You ever think of it in those terms that you kind of control the volume of what that building's going to be like?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you want fans to be quiet, then execute. It's simple. But I've been there twice. I think it was twice, and so it is loud and it is a little bit different. The ceiling and everything, and so. But it's a good environment. They play well at home.
People talk about their offense a ton and for good reason. Defense is pretty good as well. They get to the quarterback.
Yeah.
Some athletes, they're pretty good on the perimeter. Just what jumps off the sheet?
Their D line is long and active. They get after it. Number 10. We played him last year, right? And so he can really get after the quarterback. The will linebacker, number 8, is as good as the linebacker we faced this year. In my opinion, he's really, really instinctive. He's always around the ball, plays hard. That's what the one thing you see when you watch tape with those guys is they're really emotional. Like they play hard, and so we got to match that, obviously.
Shannon, Jordan Lyle didn't get a ton of snaps during conference play for most of the games up until this past weekend where he got the most in conference play that he had. Did he show anything different in practice that earned those snaps this week?
Yeah, I think he had a really good week of practice, and I think that, that room's a talented room, and so we've talked about that all year of, splitting up reps and all the rest, and we just thought it was appropriate to get him some carries. And the thing about it is like, you go into games and you have a certain plan of like reps. You really, you're going to try to do certain things, and sometimes the game just doesn't flow in a way that it works out. It's just, I'm just being honest, and so it doesn't always go the way you think it's going to go. And so it's not that my point with that is, it's not that the weeks before he had bad weeks of practice. I mean, he's a pretty consistent player, right? And so it was just good to get him in there because he's very talented and good to see him do a lot of good things.
When a player of caliber pitches the ball and it ends in an interception, from a scale of 1 to 10, what is your frustration and what is your message to him when he comes to the sideline?
My frustration is low. I mean, I'm not a guy that overreacts to things like that. I mean, I understand that bad things are going to happen in games. With the technology today, I like to watch it, to see. And because ultimately your initial reaction to things isn't as realistic as you think it is, right? And so a lot of times I try to just keep my comments to myself until I actually see it. The first thing I do is ask him. When he's walking off the field, I just ask him. I was like, "What happened there?" And typically, when he says what he says is more accurate than the way I feel. And so what he said was just, he said, I saw Arroyo in my sight and he was moving, and when I tossed it, right after I tossed it, he stopped. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, you watch the tape and he's moving. It's obviously a screen to him, but the guy twisted and kind of got in the window. So Cam moved to the left, and when he moved to the left, he had an opening, he tossed it, and Elijah saw a guy and stopped, and the ball went to the defender. And so, I mean, that's honestly one of those plays that are just like, hey man, bad things happen. They, sometimes you just can't control it. And so you just move on, really. I mean, it wasn't really as an egregious play as I thought, like when I saw it. And then when I watched it and we all communicated, it was just like, he was just trying to flip it to him, and he was open and he was moving and he stopped. And then the ball went to them. It's unfortunate, you hate it, but in my opinion, it's more about how you respond to things like that than the actual crisis, right? And so I try to stay even keel and just take the information and deliver it, and have a simple message, and really, what are we going to do next type deal.
You talked last week about the idea of maybe pressing too much
Yeah.
against Georgia Tech. How do you feel like it went against?
I thought it went much better. So the message through the week was, we're going to have to be patient. We got to take what they give. I mean, defenses right now aren't playing super aggressive against us in the back end, right? And so we don't have a lot of just shots down the field. Like, we actually hit Jacoby on a post. We had him on a vertical. We barely missed, and we had Elijah down the middle. But for the most part, like, they're going to play over the top, right? And so, the messaging was just staying patient, taking what they give. And we did for the most part. I thought it was very methodical. It wasn't a flashy game by any stretch, but I kind of knew that going into it because of the way they played defense, and the structure of their defense, and they're very disciplined in the way that they play, right? And so I knew we were going to have to take underneath stuff and run the ball effectively and throw off of runs, and that's what we did. And then Cam's, pocket awareness and like feet in the pocket were as good as they were all year. I mean, there were multiple times that he got to the very last read to the running back from left all the way to right. Protection was awesome. That's a big part of that, right? And so I thought his awareness in the pocket was really, really good. And there was a handful of plays in the game that didn't go our way, but that's probably always going to be the case, right? I mean, you're not going to execute 100% of them all perfect. And so, but for the most part, we did play within the plan. And I thought the first drive was awesome. That was really, the first drive was kind of what we laid out, It was a 6.5 minute drive, and we just kind of marched it down the field and scored. And then we were really in the lull. It was working the same way, and just something would happen. Like we lined up wrong in a formation that took out a 10-yard gain and put us behind the change. And then we threw the pick slightly after that. The other one, we're moving and Strep fumbles. Well, Strep don't really ever fumble, so our ball security needs to be better. And so it was just like a little thing here and there. I mean, it's 1 yard, it's 2nd and 1, and we run a tempo run play, and we're not all set. So Cam's got to make sure everybody's set. So it takes us back to 3rd and 6. They go cover 2. We got Elijah down the middle, and the throw's a little off, and we don't hit it for a touchdown. It was just like little things that were just kind of bogging us down a little bit.
Defenses are going to play you different every
Yeah.
week. Do you feel like it was important for the offense to see, hey, we can still score 40 points when we have to take
Yeah.
what the defense gives us?
I think absolutely. You know, I mean, it's a long game, you know, and I think that, you know, the way games go, like I mentioned earlier, games are typically really tight at halftime. Even in, you know, look at the Duke game, you know, we scored 50 that game. We were down 17 at halftime, I think. You know what I mean? There's a reason why you play the full 4 quarters, right? And so, but it is, you know, the messaging, and what I said earlier was the messaging to Cam. It's like, there is no 40-point plays. You know, you gotta get to 40, it's a process, you know, and it's not always a quick process. Sometimes it's more of a marathon than a sprint. And sometimes it is a sprint, but like games lay out different. And the journey of navigating the game is honestly part of the fun, you know?
I know the goals, want to know every week, and that's all
Mhm.
that matters, completely understand that. Your side of the ball heard quite a bit of booing last year, there was noise.
Yeah.
The fact that you guys are ranked number 1 in like 83 different offensive categories nationally, is that, I know it doesn't matter, but it does. Is that any sort of badge of honor for this team that?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't pay much attention to the noise. I know people say that, and some mean it and some don't mean it. I honestly don't pay attention to the noise because I deal in reality. And so the reality is this. When I took over this offense, there were 100, right? So last year we were around 25 or 26 at the end of the year. To me, that's a huge jump. That was a lot of positive things, right? Now, did they have the right to boo at times? Absolutely. I mean, my wife was probably booing at times, you know? And so, but that's fine. They have every right to do that. And if you buy a ticket and you're a fan, then you have every right to boo. You know, I don't feel good about certain things either, you know? But I do know that there's a process to getting good at something. It doesn't happen overnight. So I was very happy with the jump we made last year. And maybe a lot of people weren't, and that's fine. Like, everybody can have their opinions of what happened. But I was very excited that we took a leap. I just want to keep going forward, right?
What's more difficult, going from 100 to 25 or 25 to 1?
I don't know. That's a good question. Probably the first one, to be honest with you. Because when you have guys that have banked reps at things and they kind of know how you approach weeks and years and stuff, it gets, not about saying easier, but when people have more reps at something, they get better at it. And you coach people over time and they understand the way the offense needs to lay out. And so I do think the initial year is the hardest because you're trying to get coaches to think a certain way too. So you're trying to get everybody kind of organized and on the same page mentally, schematically, and everything. And that just takes a lot of time and energy. And so.
Hey Shannon, you have a running back room with 4 guys really playing at an incredibly high level, probably all capable of being, say, a number 1 running back anywhere. How has that been holding together? You know, no one's gonna have a 1,000-yard season, most likely. Then you have a freshman come in the other day looking as good as anybody has in a Miami uniform in a long time. Like, how's that all holding together for you guys as a coaching staff?
I mean, good right now. I mean, I think when you're winning, things hold together pretty tightly, right? And so, but I do give those guys and the people that coach them a lot of credit because, you know, they do seem genuinely happy for the guy that makes the play. They really do. Now, at the end of the day and at the end of the game, you know, do people go back in their room and wish they had more or whatever? I'm sure they do, right? I'm sure they do. I mean, that's the natural response. But overall, you know, you can see them like doing little things for each other that is pretty unique. And I think those guys are genuinely bonded together in a way that, and we might not have a 1,000-yard rusher, but we're probably going to have, you know, over 2,000, you know, so I mean, it's like the collective group is doing really well.
Has the offense exceeded your expectations? I spoke with Xavier Struggle in July, and he said, you know, we're gonna have the best offense in the country in July. Have they exceeded your expectations?
I don't know about exceeded. I mean, I knew we had this potential, You know, I mean, you never know how things are going to unfold, obviously. But I knew we had the potential to be good on offense because we're solid. We're solid in every position group, right? I mean, our O-line's really solid. Our tight end room's solid. I mean, we're solid in every group. So, you know, on paper, you feel good about it. You know, now you don't always know how it's going to go, you know, because there's so many different variables that factor into success that, you know, sometimes it's out of your control. Sometimes you got injuries and all the rest that can happen. And so, but I did feel good about what I saw on paper.
It seems like, speaking of talented rooms, we haven't seen much of the younger receivers here because that top four has been so good. How have they progressed throughout the season?
Man, we got some talented guys in that group, and you know, and those guys are gonna have their time at some point. I don't know when that point will be. Heck, it might be Saturday, you know. But I'm excited about the young guys. I really am. It's just we've been in a lot of tight games, you know, and the thing about this game is when the game's on the line, you want experienced guys out there that have made a lot of football plays, you know. And so it's not a knock on any of those guys. It's just the natural progression of things within a team is hey man, I compete every day, and I compete in a way that when I get my opportunity, I take full advantage of it, you know. And those guys are going to get that opportunity, and they're all going to be super successful here. And it's just right now, it's these guys' time, right? And they're taking advantage of it, and we're trying to squeeze the juice out of them as much as possible.
Anything else?